We have a new exciting bike today. This is the E-Clipse from Solar, and I have to say, Solar has done a great job keeping this bike hush-hush because I have not heard any chatter about this bike, and today is the day that the embargo is lifted, so now we can talk about it. But before we go ride this thing, let's do what we usually do, talk about the specs, then we'll gear up and go take the bike for a first ride.
The Solar E-Clipse has a 72 volt, 45 amp hour battery. The battery is removable from the side of the bike, but it's not what I'd consider a quick swap. You do need to unscrew a couple of bolts to open the battery door. The controller is an Orient 300 amp controller that has Bluetooth functionality to custom tune the power of the bike. There's an integrated fan under the seat to help expel heat away from the controller. The motor is an IPM 6 kilowatt motor. It's got a KKE fork and shock, and it's got 19-inch wheels front and rear. The Solar E-Clipse is tipping the scale at 134 pounds with the battery installed. The bike also comes with street legal equipment like this turn signal kit that you can mount to the rear of the bike, but I'm not going to put that on because I think it looks better without it. Speaking of street legal equipment, the bike also comes stamped with a 17-digit VIN if you want to try and register it. Lastly, if you decide you want to purchase the Solar E-Clipse, we've got it listed on the ECR Marketplace, where you can find the bike for sale at a current MSRP of $5,995. Links are in the description.
All right, so getting started on the E-Clipse here, this one's a little bit different. You have this key fob here. There's no actual key that you put in the bike. And so it's actually got this lock and unlock feature, which is an alarm. So let's try that out first. You lock it. That means that the bike is armed, and so when you move it, it should make a noise. We'll see. There it goes. So that's the alarm if somebody's trying to take your bike. Sounds like an old telephone. But then you unlock it with that button there. And to start it, let's hop on this thing. And I'll show you what that looks like. You have to put the kickstand up. And then you hit the center button, which is a lightning bolt, twice. And you'll hear that beep. Now you can see this powering up here, which is a nice display. It gives you a fair amount of readout, gives you motor temperature, rotating speed, so your RPM. It's got a big park feature here, which will show you when you're in your ride modes. Your state of charge up here, we're at 99%, and your high and low beams. I think it shows you your blinkers, which is pretty cool. And yeah, so nice display. I mean, that's definitely a step above some of the other bikes in this category. So I'm going to put this key in my pocket, put my gloves on, we'll go for a ride. So you've got Eco and Sport, and you have to hit this park button here. This yellow button is for park. You'll see that it's in Sport there. You can flick that switch and then it goes to Eco, but we'll run it in Sport like we normally do. All right, so one thing I can tell you right off of the bat here. The steer lock on this is pretty tight. There's not a ton of wiggle room there. It seems like it's enough, but the turning radius might be a little bit compromised with that. This thing scoots along pretty good. It's interesting. Now I'm just keeping it fully tapped right now on this dirt road. And it's got like a little bit of a surge effect. Like it's reaching its limit and then kind of cutting power. And I'm curious to see when we mess with the power settings on this, if that'll change at all. So Solar has told us that you can unlock this bike to go 70 miles per hour, which would be another 15 miles per hour on top of where we've currently got the bike set up. So we'll have to dig into that and see if that is truly possible. I'm curious to get into the app itself and tune this bike a little bit. It's kind of tough because I use Apple products and the app does not work with Apple products, so I'm gonna have to go visit some friends that have, bike just died on me. What just happened? Power it off and on again. That was weird. Bike just shut off on me. I don't know what that was about. But anyways, what I was saying was the bike will do 70 miles per hour. I just need to tune it on an Android. So I need to lean on some friends that have Android phones to do that. So we'll save that for another video. This is just the first ride. Testing this bad boy out. And we'll take a little glimpse into the range here as well. Wow, it's windy. Holy shit. All right, let's bust this thing out on the road. Wow, it's so windy right now. This thing is very smooth right now. If you can hear a lot of wind noise, it's because I'm wearing an open face helmet and it's very windy out to begin with. And I'm also going 55 miles an hour. So those three things are making it probably a little bit windier, but aside from that, this bike is very smooth, very quiet, and very comfortable on the road like this. But I'm gonna get off the main road here and settle back in on the dirt road. We'll go at a little bit more moderate of a pace. It's got good acceleration. The throttle response, the way that it's currently set up, is a little bit delayed in my opinion. It's not like when I chop the throttle, it still goes for a second. The way it builds RPM feels a little funny to me, but once again, I'll point out that there is an option to tune a lot of this power curve within the app, and I feel like that is a result of the way that this bike is currently tuned. So that is something that we'll need to look into when we do kind of the full review on this thing. This is just the first ride right now. But all in all, like, it's a very comfortable bike to ride. It feels to me like this is the first attempt to make a potentially street legal, more road-oriented, lightweight eMoto. All the street legal bikes to this point are bigger and heavier. The only bike that I can think of that's really in this category right now is the Cake Calc, and that is their on-road version or their street legal version. And not to say that this comes from the factory street legal, but it looks like it's got all the equipment to make that possible if you have a lenient state, or if you're using a service like Dirt Legal. Shout out to our friends at Dirt Legal. They're not affiliated with us, but they are our friends, and you can get bikes street legal through them. So, all right, let's talk about the reasons why I think this is a street-oriented or light dual sport-oriented bike versus a off-road bike. I'm just going to run through kind of the list of things while I'm riding and thinking of them. Number one thing I noticed is wheelbase. The wheelbase on this is longer than a Sur-Ron, and I'd say that's a good thing for higher speed stability. In speaking of the bike's geometry, like, I can feel that the front wheel of the bike feels a little bit tucked underneath the bike, and it's all good, especially on pavement. It doesn't really matter. It feels fine, but like it definitely has that motorcycle type characteristic where when you're getting into a corner, why does it keep doing this? Bike keeps shutting off on me. And happened to me once before in a corner when I was slowing down. I think it might be something to do with the brake sensor, but I'm just going to shut it off. Turn it back on. Take it out of park, put it in sport, and you're back going again. So I don't know what that is, but I think it has something to do with the brake sensors, which this bike does have brake sensors that I'd like to pull off because it kills power when you're trying to give it throttle and you have the brakes actuated. So something we take off on basically everything, and this bike would be no exception. I would take that off as well. But what I was saying is when you're entering like a loose corner like I was back there, I can feel like the front wheel feels tucked underneath the bike, the head tube angle feels a little bit steep, and it just feels a little bit unnerving in a corner, and I can just tell that that's like a street bike characteristic and doesn't have that front end stability that you would want on a dirt bike. So that's one other thing that I'm noticing. That's just geometry. Speaking of components on the bike, we can talk about the rear shock being a direct mount to the swing arm. There is no linkage, and not to say that companies like KTM haven't figured out how to do a non-linkage bike, but with the way that this bike is set up, it's not really a great design for an off-road rear shock. It's totally suitable for riding on rougher terrain like a dirt road, but it's definitely not going to hold up very well if you're hammering off-road very hard. And they point that out in the manual. The way that they word it in the manual is they don't want this bike jumped, and they don't want it to be ridden, I think they said extreme, which you can use that, interpret that your own way, but it just makes me feel like they don't want this bike ridden very hard off-road. No surprise there. You look at the design, it's a sleek design. It's more style over, dirt bike form, and that's totally cool. Like, it fits for this bike. The chain is a very thin chain that would be troublesome if it's being put through a lot of abuse. This nice display is awesome for riding on the street, but if you have one big crash on a dirt bike, which, let's face it, I crash almost every time I ride, this thing is not going to be in good shape. But also, if you look at like the sweep and the bend of these bars, like this is a street bar, kind of a cafe style bar in my opinion, not a dirt bar. It does have a direct mount stem. I think that's cool. Grips are not good. I won't sugarcoat it. I would take these grips off and put different grips on like immediately. The brakes are okay, not great. Brakes are not great. Could just be the pads though. I would say the same thing for the surround when you get right on it, that those brakes are not great either. These could have more potential, but currently they're a little spongy, a little soft. Not a whole lot of bite. What else can we talk about? It's got a full-size seat, which is excellent. I think the whole ergonomics of this bike, honestly, are really good, especially if you're doing what I'm doing right now, just running around the road. It is a very comfortable bike to sit on. It feels bigger than a Sur-Ron. It feels bigger than a Talaria. The seat feels better. You can scoot forward, you can scoot back. The headlight is big and bold. I'd like to test it at night and see. You got high and low beams. That's great for street riding. The front end puts out like a little bit of Kawasaki KLR 650 vibes to me. The rest of the bike does not carry that through it. It definitely looks more futuristic and kind of this modern e-bike design, but the headlight's kind of cool. Kind of gives me that KLR vibe, which who doesn't love a KLR? All right, so what else? The motor definitely sits pretty low, so ground clearance would be compromised. Another reason I'd run it on the street or dirt roads and not off-road. Yeah, this thing scoots right along, feels good at speed, doesn't feel like it's trying too hard to maintain the speed, so yeah, I think it's pretty good. This bike, to me, feels like it's a bike in the new category of kind of off-road, but mostly street-oriented electric dirt bike that is super lightweight. I would not tell you to get this bike if you're looking to ride a lot of off-road. All this to say that it's all good. Like, I didn't look at this bike when it came in and I was like, boom, here we go. Here's the next electric dirt bike that's going to be a contender. You can kind of tell a lot by just looking at a bike, and just looking at this bike for all of those reasons that I mentioned, this is going to be a good runaround bike for running on the road. That is my honest opinion of it right now. Everything that I've done so far in this quick first test has kind of helped me verify that to myself. And I don't want you to look at this and think that that's a negative, because I look at all of these things and think that it's awesome. There's one bike that's kind of blazing a new path for street legal dual sport electric dirt bikes, and it's something that we haven't had much of yet, so I think that's super cool.
During this test, in sport mode, at speeds of a constant 30 to 55 miles per hour, the Solar E-Clipse made it 18.6 miles when the battery read 50% and 27.3 miles when the battery read 25%. We'll do some more tests with the bike to determine what's happening with the brake sensors and the bike intermittently shutting off. We'll also unlock the governor on the E-Clipse and see what type of top speed that we can achieve after doing so. Let us know what you think of this new bike, and thanks as always for watching.